This is KTN News. Fried ginger has ginger oil, which is good for a healthy living lifestyle. It combines wonderfully on salads, stir-fries, when basted on roasted meat or simply sprinkled on your favorite dish. Available in 250 ml, 500 ml and 1 liter. In a business, it's daddy having time for me 5 days a week. With NCBA Business Banking, the numbers that matter to you matter to us. NCBA Bank. Fried ginger has ginger oil, which is good for a healthy living lifestyle. It combines wonderfully on salads, stir-fries, when basted on roasted meat or simply sprinkled on your favorite dish. Available in 250 ml, 500 ml and 1 liter. They say a day is too long in the world of politics.
Mr. President, even I heard you say you would be happy one day to see a woman president.
On Checkpoint, we highlight the good, bad, and downright ugly for the week that was for you.
Elections is not for President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta.
It is actually mission critical.
A weekly segment, House of Cards, we dissect the political intrigues for you and the musical chairs herein in the high-stakes pursuit for power.
Reggae will stop.
Nobody can stop reggae.
Null and void.
Just who has everything in check for you? Only on Checkpoint.
This handshake and BBI and amendment of the Constitution specifically for you as Raila Odinga?
It was never meant to be something for Raila Odinga.
Honorable Karua, to me that's a little bit dishonest.
The dishonesty here is on the part of the BBI proponent.
Would you at any point consider working with Raila Odinga? You have worked with him before.
The choice I have for 2022 from where I sit, the horses, and I've said it many times, is Raila Odinga and William Ruto.
The President told us during the first term that the only people who are going to play politics is him and the deputy.
I'm not familiar with that particular statement from the President.
Do you think it's that time that William Ruto left the government?
Well, I do not understand how he would leave government. He is there pursuant to an election.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express. Thanks for staying with us. We continue reviewing some of the news making headlines 44 minutes past 6 a.m. In studio, I'm joined by Bunyasi Sakwa, Member of Parliament, Nambale constituency, Martins Owino, Member of Parliament, Ndiwa constituency, and via way of Zoom, Dr. Joseph Mbogwa, who is a public policy analyst. We've highlighted some of the developments happening in the coast region. Gentlemen, let's shift focus right now to the vaccination drive in the country, where just yesterday a directive was given that all civil servants must get a COVID-19 vaccine or face disciplinary action. This directive was issued by the head of public service and secretary to the cabinet, Joseph Kenywa, requiring civil servants to get their vaccinations by August 23rd deadline. Kenywa says COVID-19 vaccination uptake in the civil service has been poor, particularly among staff in security and education. And as KTN's Daniel Kariuki reports, this comes even as COVID numbers continue surging. Take a look.
Woe unto you if you are a civil servant and you have been avoiding vaccination against COVID-19. The government has issued an ultimatum that all civil servants must be vaccinated by the 23rd of this month. In a statement wired to media houses, Head of Public Service Joseph Kenywa says civil servants will be given priority in the mass vaccination and those not vaccinated to at least get their first jab. Those who do not receive the vaccine by the specified date will be classified as discipline cases and will face disciplinary action. Kenya says this comes after it was reported that there was a low uptake of COVID-19 vaccines among public servants, especially the security sector, teachers and the core civil service, saying the poor vaccine uptake has implicated negatively service delivery to the public service. According to the statement, some employees have deliberately evaded getting vaccinated in order to avoid going to work under the excuse of working from home. The directive has elicited mixed reactions, with some questioning whether the government can compel its workers to take a jab.
Trying to come out in a manner suggesting that if you don't go for the vaccination, you'll be disciplined is wrong. And that one, as a union, we are not going to accept.
The government has a duty to protect its own citizens, not only from external or other dangers, but from themselves.
However, according to lawyer Wahome Gikonyo, there is no law set to fire those who do not take the vaccination.
Before they fires anyone, they will have to comply with the provisions of the Constitution and the Fair Administrative Action Act. Give that person a fair hearing.
On average, Kenya has been administering almost 10,000 COVID-19 doses of vaccine per day. So far, over 1.8 million people in the country have been vaccinated. Some countries have implemented this directive, especially in the United States, where the CNN fired 3 employees who came to work without getting a COVID-19 vaccine, as the company stepped up efforts to keep the virus from spreading in its offices. The United States has a law that allows companies to compel their employees. But even as the US got serious about vaccination, the country has issued an advisory cautioning against traveling to Kenya due to COVID-19. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention warns that there is a high risk for the virus in Kenya and encouraged its citizens to take vaccination before traveling to Kenya. Meanwhile, in Makueni, a section of leaders are calling on the government to postpone the devolution conference over the surge in COVID numbers.
Hata watu wakianza kuchanjwa kuanzia kesho, watapata chanjo ya pili siku gani? Kwa hivyo tunauliza serikali kuu kupitia kwa Mheshimiwa Uhuru Kenyatta, kongamano hili litaleta balaa Makueni.
And over the last 24 hours, 1,183 people have tested positive for the virus from a sample size of 8,144. The positivity rate now stands at 14.5%. Unfortunately, 32 patients have succumbed to the disease, bringing the total death toll to 4,211. Daniel Kariuki, KTN News.
So that report by Daniel Kariuki paints a picture. The virus is still with us with a positivity rate of 14.5%. You can definitely not fail. You cannot choose to actually regard those Ministry of Health guidelines. I'm looking at the dailies today. Nakuru, Nyeri, Kirinyaga and Meru feel coronavirus burden due to a culture of social gatherings and high rate of non-communicable diseases. So it's definitely still with us. The fourth wave might be ravaging the country. So make sure you get vaccinated. But as we encourage the population to do that, Sakwa, talk to me about something that's going on in Parliament. I'm looking at a headline right here. You now risk being denied access to both private and public places if you're not fully vaccinated or do not possess a COVID-19 negative certificate. If MPs pass a motion currently before the House, I understand you're set to discuss it tomorrow. But what say you about that particular direction we are set to take?
Thank you very much, Jesse. I'm glad that this question has come up for discussion. Yes, people have personal choices and personal spaces, but that's generally accepted only if those personal choices do not negatively impact the others around their space. People can out of fear, for example, may refuse to take a job, but still want to go and mingle in public without having it. I think that's unfair. But people may refuse to take a job for good reason if they stay in their own spaces and they can convince, for those who are employed, the employers, that that's the right thing to do. There may be medical reasons, perhaps, that would make it unsuitable, but that's not the case. In Parliament, all of the 350 members of the National Assembly, and I'm sure similarly in the Senate, are people who interact widely, almost on a daily basis, certainly every weekend. So you have about 350 sources of trouble into the Assembly, if you don't take precautions. So I think some sort of coercion, I think is going to be helpful, so that we only exclude those. And I will talk about members. There are also staff. Parliament has about 1,000 people milling around every day. I think everybody needs to have taken that first step to protect themselves as well as protecting others. I think we shall find a medium. But some move there is extremely important, and I think it's urgent.
Okay. Well, you sit in the Health Committee, Martins. Well, what say you about these moves, especially that directive by Kenya, 2 weeks to get the COVID-19 jab or else? Add your voice.
Thank you, Rogers. There are two things here. If the vaccine was not available, that's another thing.
Okay.
But if the vaccine is there and you are a public servant who is supposed to be in the front line in any description, and you, out of your own beliefs, you think you should not take it, we have public health laws that protects this country. And mark you, the most important function of any government is to defend the rights of the people. For example, Roger, you and I, if we are working in a government institution, I'm vaccinated, and you choose not to be vaccinated. And we know there are breakthroughs in this virus. I can still be infected even if I'm vaccinated. So you predispose me to that danger. That is not fair to you, to me, even to your family. So the government has to come in to restore order. And this is not only in public places, even in the eateries, the hoteliers. You have to have certificate of health in order to work in those. If you are not, you cannot even work. So this is, I congratulate Kenya. This has to be done. If you don't want, you can stay home. Put it as a scenario when you are a departmental leader and you don't want to be vaccinated, your deputy will take your place, say you cannot work. So getting rid of you may not even fire you. It's very easy. You can be easily replaced and be rendered unproductive, and that is where you go. Now, I take a concern with the union. In fact, the union should come out and promote vaccination for the betterment of their people, so that they stay productive. And lastly, Rogers, I agree with Senator Kilonzo. This disease is not as polite as it is seen on those screens. This is a disease that denies you oxygen in your lungs. And right now, it has gone communal, meaning people are dying in rural communities. The access to mitigation of this disease is inadequate. People will not have beds and all that. So the only way we have is the containment, doing all those protocols which are listed. So anybody who wants to put another person in danger and thinks that is his right or her right is wrong. And in other jurisdictions, traditionally, if I can jog your mind, when the leprosy was in the world and there was no cure, you were put almost a mile away from people. I think the government is being modest in requiring that you have to be vaccinated, and the vaccines are there. So even what is coming in Parliament, I hope they will ask me to second it. You have to, the rights have to have responsibility. You cannot enjoy your rights and predispose me to danger. That is not acceptable.
Okay, so
globally.
It's a balance right there. Dr. Mbugu, add your voice to this, especially with the ongoing vaccination drive in the country. I'm looking at an average of almost 10,000 jabs being administered each day. So far, the numbers are slightly more than 1.8 million, the people who have been vaccinated in the country. But what say you about the ongoing vaccination drive?
Thank you, Jesse, and I cannot agree any better than the way my panelists and that have mentioned on the importance of vaccination. I think it is very critical because, as my colleagues have mentioned, the cardinal role of any government is to preserve life. And if it doesn't do that, then it is failing in its duties. We are not talking here about preserving life by having just police officers and the military here and there. We are talking about preserving life in other forms. Now, at the present time, the question of how to deal with certain issues becomes very critical. Certain important things, the role of the state, for example, right? We know overall it has been a provision of security, protecting the borders and all that, but there are other roles that are coming very critical in the present time. One is this kind of pandemic that we have. We have also the state as providing food, for example, or dealing with the climate change as an important aspect of the state. So when we are talking about this vaccination, we are talking about a pandemic that is ravaging the whole world. And if we don't go towards that direction, particularly on vaccination, then we are endangering the people's lives. We know we have had pandemics in the past, whether it is Spanish flu or the bubonic that wiped millions around the world. We don't want to live like our great-grandparents when they did not have the technology to have drugs and vaccination as we have, and we simply stand there. So what Kenya has done, I applaud him also. I let all the public servants, because they are very critical, take the jumps as quickly, particularly if they are enabled to access it as quickly as possible. We don't want a situation where they are being told to have vaccination within a particular date, 23rd of August or all that, and then accessing the vaccine is difficult. Let that possibility of also then getting that vaccination as quickly as possible be provided. And not only the civil servants. I would like to see personally all leaders, whether it is our MPs at the national level, the parliament, and the Senate, all the way to the MCS at the ward level, they are all vaccinated because they are holding meetings left and right. And in that situation, there could be a kind of a huge problem of having this vaccination go when the crowds come. And I would like to see the members of parliament urging the government and making provisions that every Kenyan is vaccinated as quickly as possible, possibly even before the end of the year. Because as days goes by, we are going to have this political mobilization. We shall be endangering the citizens of the country. We have seen what has happened in countries like, the US, when President Trump was holding these meetings everywhere. Studies show that those who attended those meetings, there was a super spread of COVID-19. We do not want to see that situation in our country. So I think, Jesse, my view is let this policy be implemented. It is not defying anybody's rights. It is protecting the rights of other Kenyans. If you may not want to take that jump for whatever reason, there could be certain things, say maybe disease condition. If you can react badly or something like that, that will be understandable. But if it is simply just refusing, that is negligence. And I think such a person should be told, okay, stay at home. When the situation will come back to normal, you can come back to work. But for now, we would not want you to be at work because you are endangering the lives of Kenyans. It's like allowing matatus or buses to overload, right? And you say, I want to reach certain place very quickly. That's why I am in excess of the required number. Now, if you endanger people's lives, or maybe a driver is driving very fast, that person has to be dealt in that way. And in respect to public servants, we are not saying they should be arrested and all that, but they should be told maybe do not get to the office until the situation is under control or you are vaccinated.
Yes, definitely. So it's 2 weeks for civil servants to get the COVID-19 jab. More details in today's dailies around the current health situation in the country. Let's talk about matters happening within the legislative arm of government. And Sakwa Bunyasi, I'm looking at page 8 of the Standard. Members of Parliament threatened to reject campaign spending cap, saying it is time. But just yesterday, the headlines were awash with some of these proposals by IEBC in terms of election campaign financing regulations 2020. Well, what's your view on this? Is it time bad, number one? And what went wrong in terms of the approach by the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission?
Thank you very much, Jesse. First of all, everybody agrees that this campaign finance regulations would be useful and perhaps very important for our systems. But there is a certain protocol that needs to be followed, that the timelines are specified in the law, that these regulations ought to have been gazetted at least a year before the election. And therein lies the problem. Does gazettement mean what IBC did late last week by gazetting the regulations and then passing them over to Parliament to debate them? Or does it mean that it will be something agreed between Parliament and IBC well before, so that finally when IBC gazettes them, their regulations approved? Because Parliament has to approve. It's not May, has to approve. So the technicality there, that even though the regulations came in just on the nick of time in terms of the proposal from IBC, any consideration was going to be outside of the 1 year minimum time, and therefore it will eat into the year. And therefore, is that legal? Is it not legal? That is the argument. And I could see our lawyers in the House were busy trying to, as the ecosystem of lawyers is always, everybody is quoting an area that supports a line of argument. But today, we're going to look into it in depth, because the Committee on Delegated Legislation, the Committee of Parliament that will look at things like this, would bring a well-thought-out analysis of it, and I will see how it goes forward. But it risks, if the conclusion is that it came in late, then it risks being considered now, so it would have to be deferred. Purely on a technicality, even before the public policy questions are debated, it would purely be on a technicality.
Okay, so it might be time bad. Martins, add your voice to this, but also the questions that come around when such figures are posted on the pages is, where's the hope for the young people who want to vie in this country? When you take a look at the amounts that might be needed to vie for political position in the country, why is it so expensive? And on the flip side, Kenya has been on the scene in terms of having one of the most expensive elections in the country. Is it just the issue of trust at the end of the day? Because the security features on this ballot papers was something Wafula Chebukati noted as pushing the cost up.
Thank you, Rogers. This IBC thing is baloney. You know, much money does not make our elections credible. It's very simple that people vote at the polling center, it is counted there, the decision there is final, and it's just relayed. That's it. That's what it is. So this capping, which is of course in the law, but the figures that are put in there are ridiculous. But let me put it in this way. In any match, a referee comes and picks the ball to the field. If the ball is deflated and you go to the field, that's embarrassment, because you ought to have checked that ball is inflated right, everything right. What IBC should have done, and to the viewers, this is how the legislation works. We have a constitution. For that constitution to be put on operation, there are some acts of parliament which has to be done. And out of those acts of parliament, we have regulations and policies. These regulations and policies are done by government ministries and agencies, which IBC is one of them. And they are also time sensitive. So what IBC should have done is to have a proposal and bring it to parliament. Because there is no proposal that goes public the way this one has gone, and it cannot be effected. So that proposal ought to have come to the Parliament, given to the delegated committee of delegation, and then they look at it, they bring it up to the public so that the public can debate. They can be asked, is this fair? This 112 million that you need in Turkana, is it fair? The public would have added their voice to it. Then it comes back to the floor and we vote for it. That is when it can be effective. Otherwise, anybody sitting in any ministry coming up with regulations and going direct to publish them, that is not the way to do things. So what will happen to this? One, I said it is dead on arrival. They will be taken because it ought to have been effected before 12 months, especially if it is a general election where we're going. But you don't bring it 4 days to, and you expect the the committee to go through public participation, which is required because all these are going to affect the people. They have to add their voice. That cannot work. Okay. So in conclusion, this is dead on arrival. And it really shows the kind of IBC that we have, and we are facing a very tough election. I hope the newcomers will inject some wisdom to it so that it can operate online and operate wisely.
Okay, since we're talking about IEBC, Daktari, what's your take on the journey towards electoral reforms? Barely 12 months to go to the general election. What say you about that? Even as you add your voice perhaps on the campaign spending cap, on whether it is time-barred or not.
Thank you again, Jesse. I think, and my colleagues for their contribution. I think on my part, first of all, the amount of money that is spent on the elections is simply crazy amounts of money. And even those approved, 5 billion for presidential candidate, and those other hundreds of millions for senator, for governor, MP, MCA, and all that. Are not the best. And let me say this, Jesse, the genesis of corruption in Kenya starts with campaign funds. You cannot, and Kenya will not win the war against corruption if campaign funds are not lowered to the very bare minimum. This is because Kenyan politicians, and this is why sometimes we have a problem, because this law should have been passed the very moment, the first sitting of parliament in 2017 or 2018, in fact, even much earlier than the current parliament. And parliamentarians, if once they were elected in 2017, for example, they should have moved up a bill in parliament, bringing down the cost of campaign in Kenya. You have mentioned very clearly, young people cannot afford those amounts of money. We are talking of a very small number of people that can afford the expenditures that go into the campaign. And what happens is the politicians know that the more they spend money in handouts, in lessons and capes and all that, the more they have a chance of winning the election for a vast majority of them. And so we have had this problem of talking about campaign funds for years and years, and it is never brought down. Because that's when the leading politicians know, let us go and give that, give lessons, give wheelbarrows, give other monies for soda, 200, 500. Because the more people I buy a soda, the more I'm able to get those votes. There are some studies have shown that they even call people and give them 500 or 1,000 and they write down their names. Okay. Because these people, once they are given this money, if you give to 20,000, you are likely able to either get the whole 20,000 or 18,000 because you are also creating a guilty conscience in the voter. That so-and-so gave me 1,000 shillings. I honestly have to vote for him because his image or his whatever is around me. He may know that I did not vote for him. So it has a very bad influence. I would like to see these campaign monies brought down to enable even if I may use this, I never like using the word hustler,
But let us get that poor person contesting for elections and winning the elections, because the moment you bring money down, it will be now the argument of policies and ideas that you have that will determine your electability, not money as it is right now.
Okay.
So maybe just 1 minute. So that is very critical, and I think Jesse, I think IBC has not done the very best. What they are trying to put across may not work, and it's something like pia nao wamelala kazini. Where were they in the last 4 years?
Yeah, interesting. And I think that's a proper footnote on that particular talking point, gentlemen, or any of us had something to say? Martins, briefly.
Yeah, I want to add something. You know, proposals are never advertised the way they did. And putting those figures so high, as you rightly said, will not only discourage the young people, but will also encourage corruption. If somebody say, okay, for me to be a governor, I have to come up with this, a lot of money, then I need to start getting that money. From where? That is one thing. Capping this cannot be implementable also. For example, there are only two countries who have managed to cap the campaign financing is Britain and Canada. And the way that works is that they have put, their campaign financing is done by parties. So you find 30,000 pounds per every seat and 90,000 for Canada. But in the US, because there's that option of private financing, they can go as much as possible. So in Kenya, where you are going to look into the accounts to see whether who withdraws what and put what, and other people have the accounts under the bed.
So tracking spending might also be a challenge.
You can't implement it.
Okay.
So I don't think we may have to review that act and put it in order.
Thank you very much. First of all, my position on this campaign funding legislation is that any effort to go towards containment of expenditures around campaigns is a healthy thing for Kenya. One of the problems we have of entry into the political sphere, when we want youth and women, people with disability to get in, one of the major deterrents is the cost of entry into politics. It's very, very high indeed. And as my colleague Owina said, and Dr. Muga, when these costs are high at that point, it sort of translates later into processes of recovery that create and breed corruption. So certainly we should support that process. The truth of the matter, though, is that like in the jurisdictions that succeeded, they did so with an incentive to say, if you make returns in accordance with as required in law, then the state, as in the US, the state will contribute, and you're within the limits, then the state pays a proportion of the aggregate based on the limits that have been set. So there's some incentive there to do it within the law. You save your own money, you have to mobilize less, and you get some help. Maybe as we go forward, we shall have a combination of one or the other. But I think that we can't proceed in Kenya the way we are doing. If you look at it, people will not produce who the sponsors are. You don't know where the money has come from. If those people are donating that much money as they do, is it a legitimate donation? Is it coming out of taxed income? Is it some sort of news evidence? There are many, many other questions to consider. So I just hope that the legislation, which may have difficulty in Parliament, will have a way in which it can come out in some form or another.
Okay, a multi-pronged approach to this particular issue. Let's see what Parliament does in terms of these deliberations, but more details on that and much more in today's dailies. So make sure you grab yourself a copy of the Standard Kenya's bold newspaper of the Daily Nation to be adequately informed. And on that note, we take a short break, but coming up after the break, we will dissect on matters state of the economy. The public transport sector is back to normal. Should PSVs lower the fare after resuming normalcy? One of the questions, even as others question if full capacity was too soon in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's not just that. Prices are set to go up. As the taxman says, excise duty on products are set to increase 4.97% in line with the average annual inflation. This and much more on the economy. Stay with us. We'll be back after this short break.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express. Thanks for staying with us. On to the state of the economy, 18 minutes past 7 a.m. And it's all to do with public service vehicles, who this week on Monday resumed carrying full capacity, with the Ministry of Transport directing matatu operators to self-regulate. The matatu operators are also expected to carry out body temperature checks for every passenger and also ensure they wear masks. Some of these directives have been adhered to by some matatu operators, although some passengers were uncomfortable with the full capacity. Beldin Waliaula has more.
With COVID-19 numbers surging, the country might be staring at a grim picture, with matatus now allowed to carry passengers at full capacity. At Kencom bus station in Nairobi, buses at the terminus tried to observe the COVID-19 measures put in place. At least there were water points, even though only a number of passengers made an effort to wash their hands. The touts checked body temperatures of those boarding the vehicles and sanitizing them. But as expected, some passengers did not sanitize or have their temperatures taken.
As an industry, we've been struggling. It was a welcome move, a timely one. But again, the numbers are rising. So as much as we want to carry the full capacity, we must as well take into consideration the lives of our passengers.
The element of full capacity was a relief to the matatu operators, but not to passengers. Some matatus could not open their windows to allow proper aeration.
Sahi naona kama watateremsha fare, ndio tuna maombi yetu sasa. Na serikali tunaomba itufungulie kanisa, tuingie watu wote kanisani. Na hayopo vile wamefungulia magari wakisema kwamba magari sifuatilie sheria za COVID-19, pia kanisani tutafanya hivyo hivyo.
Serikali kwanza ingeweka kipao mbele chanjo kwa wananchi karibu wote.
For those using the public vehicles, they did not have a choice. In some areas such as Voi, matatu operators did not observe the COVID-19 regulations such as properly wearing masks.
Maana COVID iko kweli, hata hapa kwetu Voi twaiona inaathiri watu. Kwa hivyo kitu tunachosema tumeruhusiwa vizuri, lakini kitu kilichoko ni kwamba tutajipanga. Tuhakikishe tumeweka mikakati ile inayohitajika, kuvaa barakoa, kusafisha mikono yetu, kusafisha magari yetu, kusudi nasi tuonyeshe kuwa tulikuwa na nia kweli ya kufanya kazi.
It will now be a wait and see whether the COVID regulations will be fully adhered by all the parties. Building Waliaula, KTN News.
So that's latest in the public service transport sector. The PSVs have resumed normalcy in terms of full capacity, but questions might linger in terms of the safety of the passengers. And let's get right into it. It's interesting. I'm still joined by our panelist, Bunyasi Sakwa, Member of Parliament, Nambale constituency, Martins Owino, Member of Parliament, Ndhiwa constituency, as well as Dr. Joseph Mbogwa via way of Zoom. He's a public policy analyst. Dr. I'd like to begin with you on this particular note. Was it too soon in terms of the resuming normalcy with PSVs? How do you view this?
Thank you very much once again. I think it is not... it's not too soon, and it's not too early or something like that. I think the whole issue is the difficulties that Kenyans are facing, and we are not just in the matatu sector or public transport, but every sector, balancing between life and also livelihoods or incomes. I think it's a challenge to the whole world. And I think this is also the same challenge that countries like US face. Do you have people locked in homes and not going to work or not traveling and all that, or not participating in the proper economic life? And in the case of the US, for example, they were giving these trillions and trillions of dollars to families to sustain them. For how long can we be able to sustain that? And I think this is where we are. What needs to be done is, as our reporter mentioned there is an important element of those managing the public transport to ensure all protective measures are taken into account. There will be some discomforts. We know COVID-19 is spread much faster in enclosed areas. Matatu or bus provides for such kind of a situation. But if they can all wear masks and the windows are also open so that there is air circulation and hand washing and any other measure, then it can allow for a degree of continuity of public transport. But it's also a little bit of a dangerous situation because it allows for spread of COVID at a much faster rate in one way or another, unless those measures are taken. Let our people take vaccination. Let Kenyan public take those preventive measures of wearing masks that are required. And that can extend. Because, of course, what this means is if we have full capacity, the social distancing is no longer there. I would have wanted to see a situation under this environment, more people using bicycles to go to work. And I have insisted for something like that for even outside COVID times. Can there be bicycle lanes? Can there be a place where in Nairobi, for example, and all towns and cities where public transport is critical, where people can go and park their bicycles? Can buildings, including many, whether, where big people work, say Central Bank, for example, or even Parliament, where we see parliamentarians riding on a bicycle and having a parking space in Parliament. If we had these sorts of things in place and we don't downlook on those who are cycling, like a situation we have now in COVID, it will have helped quite a lot in deterring the spread of COVID-19.
Okay, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Martins, add your voice to this, because we've seen in terms of adherence, not everyone is wearing the mask correctly, at least. In terms of enforcement, we well know there might be issues going forward. But talk to me about churches and places of worship as well. Don't they feel sidelined if you look at it? Why matatus and not churches?
Good question. And the other time I said churches is where, when things go wrong, people get some healing and they're prayed for and all that. Actually, it's easy to manage churches than what we are seeing in the matatu industry. So churches should also have that kind of leeway to work with. But look at it this way, Rogers, if you have been, if you go for so many days without food, like our brothers who are on sea, thank God some survived. When you come to the shore, you cannot be started on a solid food. In fact, sometimes go liquid for a lot of time for the system to back up and work well. So the gesture of getting matatu and buses back is okay, but full capacity is outrageous, because what you will see here now, leave alone the behavior, we will have rural and urban cross-infections that even if you come to lockdown, you'll not be containing anything. Now, these people are so, I don't know how to drive, the value of health in what we see in the public is very limited unless you get the virus and you start suffocating, you can't get oxygen. It's when you can know this is real. But in public health, we want them not to get there, because when you get there, chances of coming back is very, very minimal. They say there's a light at the tunnel. Yeah, that light may turn to be another dark in the tunnel when they are shut down completely because of the cross-infections I'm talking about. So my appeal is, yeah, as people are hurting, it's understandable, but we are also gracing death with this kind of behavior. And I think the Ministry of Health should move quickly to set mass vaccination points at these areas so we vaccinate as many as possible, because this disease is not as you see it. It's very, very aggressive, its transmissibility is very fast, and of course with high mortality rates. So my point on this is, yes, the people are suffering, they have been given a leeway to do their business, but let them also be responsible so that they put masks properly. The mask must cover your mouth and, and your nose. And when you talk is when you should cover them even more. So when you just talk and passengers come in, you are congested. In fact, they should have gone 80% before full throttle so that they can manage people. It's not a good scenario. Yeah, okay. It's not very good.
Well, Sakwa, add your voice to this.
Thank you, Roger. Yeah. First of all, Kenya is making strides, and we are praising how many we have done. We have done 1.8 million. Mm-hmm. I think global numbers indicate that for herd immunity, we need to be nearer the 40 to 50% mark, yeah. Which means we should be doing about 18, 20 or 20-some million vaccinations. Then we'll be relatively safe. Our children will come from homes that have got vaccinated parents and other relatives. They will interact in the matatus with the people who are more likely than not to have been vaccinated. But as it is, that's not the case. Anyhow, be it as it may, I still think that given the level of awareness now, which is growing, full capacity is okay for as long as everybody has their masks worn properly. And I do hope that the price of masks will drop so that matatus can carry them in their vehicle. If you don't have one, maybe for 5 shillings, not 20, yeah, somebody can pick a mask. And so on. But I think that's the way to go. The hardships have been very severe, very, very severe indeed. But we must step up the vaccination.
So we're talking about hardships. So what say you, Sako, about Matatu saying we won't cut fares despite resuming full capacity? We need to recover in one way or the other in terms of the aftershocks of COVID-19. Is this unfair to the passengers, or it's simply business?
It is business. It may be unfair. I think it is unfair to passengers, and they still will get immediate relief. That's not going to come that quickly. But you can see the depth of losses that this transport industry incur is so huge that when they get a chance to recover, they aren't going to cut their fares unless someone is going to subsidize the losses they had. So it was not unexpected. But I guess that as a passenger, they're expecting some immediate relief because it has been very high indeed, very, very high actually.
Okay. Daktari, as we finalize on this particular issue, what say you about adherence? Because that story ran a spot check around Nairobi City, and it's not always adhered to in terms of the Ministry of Health guidelines. Yes, you're supposed to wash your hands, the mask issue, as you finalize briefly.
Thank you very much, Rogers. I think the problem that we have largely is that one of following the established rules, not just in COVID-19 aspects, but we Kenyans sometimes ignore so much in other areas, whether it is political party rules, whether it is car driving rules in the public roads, whether it is in going for a certain service, you find people jumping the queue. You find people around the queue and you want to go ahead. Now, this is what we are seeing even in COVID-19, where people are not adhering to the rules, goes across all other areas. And that is where we sort of fail in one way or another. Adhering to what Minister Kagwe has been saying and his technocrats is very critical in itself. Wear masks, for example, it reduces the percentages of getting or opportunity of getting this particular disease, or even keeping social distance, whether in a shopping, whether in the bar, whether in the church, anywhere. If we keep on ignoring these rules, we are basically welcoming COVID-19 around ourselves. Now, the other thing I think is very critical here, as we move towards possibly opening up in some other areas, we are talking about just public transport, but the other areas now we are talking about church and all that. We have to be very careful on the trade-off. And I think I like what my colleague has mentioned there. on the cost, or rather the cost of health in our society. Now, what this means is if we kind of stop this social distancing, whether in church, whether in public transport, whether in walking the streets and all that, it means what my colleague mentioned on cross-infection is going to be very high. Already, Bagadi is over capacity. We saw the other lady who died after sending a message on Facebook, and she died because there was no oxygen. Now, there is going to be an increase in COVID if we fail to adhere to these protocols as it is. Very critical. And I would like to urge for me, for all Kenyans, if we had the culture of keeping strictly to the rules, not of COVID-19 alone, but in everything, or help our children grow knowing that they need to observe this. If I go to buy something and find someone on the queue, I should not put my hand behind the ears and the shoulder to say, nipatie sweetie pale ama nipatie hiyo mandizi ama whatever it is. Queue behind me, let the shopkeeper finish with me, and then, I go, you come. If we have that general rule, I can assure you, even under this COVID-19, ingekuwa kitu cha kawaida to observe the COVID-19 regulations.
Okay, well noted, Daktari. And Martins, we understand there might be fatigue amongst the population, and at times politicians have come into sharp focus due to these super spreader events. And we might have a devolution conference coming up soon. Bearing in mind all of this, what do you have to say as we finalize on the Matatu issue?
Right, I think this disease is very real, and as I said earlier, I support Kilonzo on that comment he made.
Okay.
That devolution should be suspended. You see, these are for men, but men are not made for these things. Life comes first. This disease, especially Delta, others were mild. The Alpha, Gamma, and all those, they're a bit mild. This one has the capacity to transmit itself so fast. And it also has the capacity to cause mortalities very quickly and en masse. So what I would advise politicians, if we love the way we do our constituents or our people, keep away from them so that they cannot congregate and transmit this among themselves. Because after all these meetings, we see people go back to their homes. Sometimes instead of taking bread home, you take the virus and you infect all your family members. Even if you're a politician, you lose those votes you are trying to get. So let's give public health protocols to work when we restrain ourselves. There are some other ways we can text our people. There's mass texting nowadays. You can talk to whoever you want to talk to, even in a split of a second, 100 people, 200 people. It's a new normal that we have to adapt and think we bring this disease down. So please, let us be responsible as well.
Okay, responsibility definitely starts with you and me. And Sako, let's shift focus right now. I'm looking at the headlines right now. More pain for consumers as prices rise in October. And Kenyans are set to pay more for bottled water, fuel, beer, and juice, among other items, starting October after the taxman raised the excise duty. So for a Kenyan, in terms of layman language, why is this going up yet again? I know there are issues to do with excise duty and adjusting it, but just break it down so we can definitely start on an informed note.
After the budget is read and the appropriate legislation, finance and appropriation bills are passed, then these measures kick in. They get headlines before the raise occurs. And people assume now the raise has already occurred, we're going to go normal for a bit. No, but actually, that's like a notification passes through the legal process, and then it kicks in around September, and in October is when people begin to feel it. That is actually, this is with us. And I think it's going to probably be, without being a prophet of doom, the crop yields this year have not done very well because of rain failure in the rains at a critical moment. So we should expect another push for price inflation to move up a little bit. When this does, it actually does really mean that the general price has gone up. We should expect to pay a little more. Transport costs will go up, fuel costs will go up, and therefore perhaps transport costs will go up. Retailers will want to recoup. Remember, we've been operating at lower capacity than is available in the economy. People have been doing less. Restaurants have been receiving less people than they can receive. Transporters carrying less people, and even churches having less people than they would like to have. They settle to make up. And as the rush goes for expenditure, it will push up prices even more.
Okay, so I mean, where should Kenyans look to? Because I'm looking, these adjustments are in line with the law, of course, but KRA will, for the first time, need to seek approval from Parliament to effect these new rates following the changes in the law that came into effect last year. So will Parliament come again to save the Kenyan Mwananchi, or this time round there won't be a pause in terms of implementation? Well, what's your take, Sakwa?
It's likely that when the chips are down, that they will pass it. Because it's also at a time when government financing is under enormous stress. Government is not raising enough revenue to meet its budget targets that they have got. And then we have this additional expenditure, well, not quite additional, but this heavy expenditure on elections and so on, that has to be funded largely this year, even though elections fall in the following year. And they're in August, a month after the new financial year, there are no new resources that will have come in sufficient quantity. So what's likely to happen is that Parliament will deliberate, headlines will be out there, there'll be alarm and so on. My suspicion that it will probably still pass.
Okay, so Dr. Mbugua, I mean, it's only getting tougher, it seems, going forward. I'm looking at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, who have consistently urged the taxman to pause this implementation of the annual inflation adjustment tax due to the current economic situation in the country. Do you agree with them? Might this be a route that should be taken in order to alleviate the suffering, or be that as it may, let the ball roll and the prices soar? Because fuel is set to go up, boda as well, bottled water. Well, what say you about this?
I think, Rogers, the issue of taxation is an issue that has not been addressed with the certain seriousness that is required in Kenya. There would be no need for the increase of taxes even under an adjustment on the inflation scale. I want to agree with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. I want to agree with many other Kenyans. But under the circumstances, the government does not have a choice apart from that increment, if at all it has to attract more taxes. But remember, it also affects the investment side, or the more investors coming into Kenya because of the high taxation. Because whatever taxation is set on any good, it means that the manufacturers will have also to increase the prices of those particular goods to meet the difference. Now, the option that we have in Kenya, which is simple, easy to do, but I think the leadership has failed to do that, is to find ways to ensure that there is an expansion on the tax base. Now, I'll take you a little bit somewhere in the past. In the early 1990s, we tried, I was in the Ministry of Finance at that time, and we carried the computerization of the tax regime at that time. So we had income tax that were all manual, and we worked very hard to increase. And of course, there was a lot of resistance at that particular time, but we had to sail it through as technocrats. Now, we also dealt the whole situation of reorganizing the institutional framework of tax regime in Kenya. Before then, it was entirely under the Ministry of Finance. We came out with the Kenya Revenue Authority. Remember, Kenya Revenue Authority was not there in 80s and 70s. It's something that we created in the early 90s. Now, that increased the tax collection around the country.
The other adjustment that came very well was in 2002. I was doing my PhD at that time. One of the topics I covered in my PhD thesis was revenue collection. And I argued in my thesis that if a new regime comes in 2002, by then the tax rate, the tax collected were 168 billion Kenya shillings. And I said if a proper regime comes in 2002, within 5 years, we should be having between 400 and 600 billion Kenya shillings. And that came to pass under the Kibaki regime. What I'm saying today is, with the proper tax collection management, what I call additional efforts, we will be able to raise not the 1.8 trillion we are collecting this year, but the tax collection should rise to about 8 trillion Kenya shillings. And that will occur by spreading the tax collection, because the majority of Kenyans don't pay taxes. You find someone is selling a cow, 50,000, he does not pay tax. You find somebody deep somewhere, he has 40,000 camels in Mandera.
Okay.
Has 40,000 cows somewhere in West Pokot or Turkana. That guy never pays any taxes. But he sells those cows somewhere. Now, if these areas are streamlined, you'll find that the tax collection will increase with the volume, the amount we collect, without raising the taxes amount in the products we have today. As a matter of fact, VAT can come down, tax rates can come down, because we are now bringing possibly an additional 20 million Kenyans in the tax paying tax collection brackets.
Right. Okay.
That's what we need to do, Rogers.
Okay, Dr. I think you've painted a picture of what exactly needs to be done. So as we finalize, Martins, I mean, we hear that the price of eggs in Uganda, importing them, they will still be cheaper than what is done here in Kenya, maize included. So at the end of the day, manufacturing, the cost of inflation, when you combine all this, what say you about the annual inflation adjustment? Is this good news to the manufacturers in Kenya?
Rogers, this is a very sad situation. First of all, let me start with the common man. And I'm very happy that these things come to the parliament, where we represent people, we see them every day, what they go through. As we talk now, there are some people who woke up this morning with empty stomach because they slept yesterday on empty stomach, even 2 days ago. And there are some people who have lost their livelihood, whether they are animals in northeastern because of drought, or their crops which have failed after they have toiled on farms for many, many weeks. So we have this kind of scenario. So whatever it is, inflation or no inflation, whatever it is, no more tax on people, because that is killing them. And I said it earlier, it's a phrase I use, don't milk the cow to the blood veins. You'll not get where you want to go. Now, as for the government, when things are tough like it is today, the government have to reorganize its priorities. Some projects will have to stop so that we can cushion Kenyans from dying. Because this is not only hunger death. This thing has come up with so mental issues. The suicide in 3 months is over 300, so to speak, because the breadwinner cannot bring, those who want to be fed needs it, the blame game, and all this. So our families, our households are in chaos.
Okay.
So we should not tax anymore. Let us seal all those tax loopholes we talk about. Let us reorganize priority in the government, but also let reach the people with some cushioning, which they can use daily, whether they are food stamps like US, whether they are cash transfers, or literally distributing money. I think the neighboring are making it because they have made the process a little bit more friendly. So no much money is used in production. Of course, that affects the prices. But it's a crisis that the government has to take on. That's why we have a government. They cannot just sit and wait and continue traditionally to pick taxes from people. That would be another suicidal kind of action.
Okay, let's see what the legislative arm of government has to do with this. Even as we go forward, things might get tougher, so just bear that in mind. Allow us to take a short break even as I release our guests who have graced us for the last 1.75 hours or so. Gentlemen, many thanks for your time and your input right here. Bunyasi Sakwa, Member of Parliament, Nambale constituency, always a pleasure. Martin Owino as well, Member of Parliament, Diwa constituency. And via way of Zoom this time round, we're joined by Dr. Joseph Mbogua, who is a public policy analyst. We appreciate your input. Allow us to take a short break. Coming up after the break is Your Health. This time round, we focus on matters vaccine access, vaccine equity, and accountability in the midst of the mass vaccination drive in the country. Are we getting it right? This and much more after the break.
This is KTN News.